It's time now for perspective, with the global coronavirus pandemic still having a profound impact on our health, freedoms and economies. The race to develop and approve an effective vaccine is more pressing than ever. How close are we to finding one, and how to ensure universal access to it once we do? My guest today is Beate Kampmann, Director of the Vaccine Centre at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on France 24. Now, a global race has been on for some time now in the search for a Covid-19 vaccine. Which, in your opinion, are the frontrunners here?
Yeah, good morning. Bonjour, and thank you for having me on the program. So this is not a question we can answer at this point in time. We know that out of the over 200 potential candidates, which is really quite unprecedented, about 9 are now in the phases of clinical trials where we're really going to find out whether they are both safe and also effective. But we need to take the time to go through with these trials, which are happening in a variety of countries right now, to find out whether the vaccines that we're having in mind will in fact prevent the disease and there are no nasty side effects. And I believe that we need more than one vaccine, in fact, because we need billions of doses, and it's very difficult to just put all your money on one horse, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Now, vaccines do, as you mentioned, usually take years to develop and test, of course, before they're approved. What are the stages of testing a vaccine that they need to go through before becoming widely available?
Sure. Yeah, so after development in the laboratory and animal testing and a promising candidate, it's taken forward to what's called safety trials in a very small number of people. These are healthy volunteers. That's called a phase 1. Then it goes into a phase 2, which enrolls between 100 and 1,000 people to look that the vaccine that we are trying to push forward actually is still safe, but also gives us the type of immune response that we think we need to combat the disease. And if that is all the case, then the vaccine goes into large trials. And at the moment, we're talking 30,000 people, for example, for some of the vaccines that are being inoculated with the to-be tested vaccine or a control vaccine, because we have to have controls as well to see really whether the vaccine makes the difference to us acquiring the infection. So that's quite a process. And only when that is completed, the vaccine can then be licensed.
Now, Russia has already approved its own Russian-made vaccine, but the global scientific community remains unconvinced. Why is that?
Yeah, so it was a very unusual step by Russia to try and license or actually make available a vaccine after what is called phase 2, because none of us had seen any of the data, which are usually published in leading journals of the world, to show the safety and the immunogenicity and also the efficacy. And that data was not available at the time that Russia took this decision. We have seen some data now on the immunogenicity, but there's still very, very limited safety data, and no licensing agency in our country or in Europe or in the US would have pushed this vaccine forward to be given to masses of people. So I'm not saying this is not a promising candidate, but the process in which this has been applied is most unusual, and I don't find it convincing or ethical.
Now, US President Donald Trump has repeatedly hinted that a vaccine could be approved before November's election. How do you feel about that claim from the US administration?
Yeah, what's rather unfortunate is the politicization of vaccine development at the moment. We're seeing vaccines used as trump cards, and that is not the way we should go about it. We need to make sure that we have the confidence to say this is a safe product, and that we cannot just willy-nilly give it to people just because it suits an election date. So I am not happy about that at all, and my scientific colleagues, I'm sure, will agree with me that the vaccine development should be driven by the science and not by politics. And that is true for any country in the world.
Now, vaccines, of course, don't come cheap. What sort of assurances are in place to make sure that an eventual vaccine is made available to everyone, including, of course, the world's most vulnerable and remote populations?
Yeah, that's an absolutely critical question at this time, because even if we do have, as you say, a safe and effective product, we still need to make sure that we have, what the Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines, calculates as 20 billion doses by the end, 2 billion doses by the end of 2021. And in order to achieve that, countries need to make a commitment that they're not going to necessarily just capture a vaccine in their own country. So this whole idea or this whole concept of vaccine nationalism is really unfortunate, and it's trying to be antagonized by a very important initiative that has been set up between the WHO, Gavi, and CEPI, which is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, which is called COVAX, which is aiming to make sure that we have vaccines all over the globe for the most vulnerable people. And that is, healthcare workers, the elderly. And if every country sort of contributes to the pot of making those vaccines accessible, we can potentially achieve that, provided these vaccine candidates are in fact successful. And also that we have to learn so much more about how long the vaccine protection might last. So it's by no means a given at this point.
Now, with all this focus, of course, on a vaccine, the small but very vocal anti-vaccination movement has made it very clear that they don't plan to be vaccinated against Covid-19. They don't plan to vaccinate their children either. How concerned are you by the anti-vaxxer lobby at this point?
So the anti-vax movement isn't new, and we are not surprised that this has come up during the COVID epidemic, or pandemic rather. I think we need to keep engaging with people and make them understand how vaccines are developed, how their safety is established, so that there is a relationship of trust. There are people on the spectrum of the really severe anti-vaxxers. In my mind, I don't think we can convince them. I think we need to work with people who are asking the genuine questions and are maybe what I would call vaccine hesitant rather than anti-vax. And I think there's a great number of people out there who have very legitimate questions, which is why it's so important that we show that the product development is really proceeding in line with all the procedures that are put in place to guarantee the safety. And that is just as important, and maybe more important now, that things are proceeding very, very quickly.
Beate Kampmann, thank you very much indeed for your insights. Beate Kampmann, Director of the Vaccine Centre at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine there.
My pleasure.